Thanks to Felicity, the great work that she's doing. You know, we got a saying over in East Texas that the rooster crows, but the hen delivers the goods. I think that's what we got with Felicity there. And thanks to all the volunteers. I know that that's what this organization really is based on. The sponsors, the exhibitors. This is a real people's expression of political will here today, and it's the real reason that I've come here, because this is what we have to have happen all across the country. I realize I stand in the way of between you and a progressive happy hour, so which I presume we will get progressively happier during that hour. I thank you very much for allowing a scruffy Texas populace to come in here and be a part of your deliberations. It just makes me happier than a mosquito at a nudist colony. Looking out at all of you Orange County summiters, you right-wing butt kickers and corporate greed whackers, you progressive champions of common sense and the common good, you agitators, yes, agitators. Agitators for America's proud progressive values of social justice, economic fairness, and equal opportunity for all people. That's what we stand for as progressives. That's what America stands for, I think. And that's what we've got to put forward again and build upon that all across the country. So it's a joy to join you here at this great community center as you strategize, organize, harmonize, and mobilize, both to put a bit of unity back in community and also to put a bit of progress back in progressive. We need that. Amen. Sure. You're already out there doing it. What a great job you've been doing. I mean, here we are in the home of the John Birch Society. The home of B1 Bob. But here we are today, building progressive thought, activism, and optimism. You know, I come to you not merely from Austin, Texas, but from South Austin. There's an attitudinal difference when you cross that river into South Austin. Our slogan over there is, we're all here because we're not all there. I think that's why we're gathered here today. Because our national, state, and local society is not anywhere near where it needs to be in terms of those unifying little d democratic values of fairness, justice, and opportunity for all. We can moan and groan about falling short of America's professed ideals, or we can link our hands and our heads and our hearts together to do something about it. That's why I'm so proud to be in front of a group that has already figured that out and is on the move. You know, cynics say it's impossible to do this, impossible to challenge the powers that be, that the social divide is too wide, the corporate order is too entrenched to make big change. But as a friend of mine who's been a pioneer in the organic movement said to me once, said, Hightower, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those who are doing it. You are what democracy really is. Just ordinary folks daring to challenge the conventional orthodoxy, daring to confront the power elites in order to advance America's deepest values. I know that's not easy. You get the feeling like that guy that B.B. King sings about, nobody likes you but your mama, and she might be jiving you too. Not easy, but it is essential if America is ever to be what it can be. Building community, some people would say, well, that's not exactly rocket science. Well, no, it's harder than rocket science, actually. Because it's complex, it's frustrating, it's confusing sometimes. I think of Joe Ely. Some of y'all might know that name. He's a great singer-songwriter out of Boston. He sings with Joe Ely and Jimmy Dale Gilmore and others. They all came out of Lubbock, Texas, the flatland up there. And Joe Butch Hango was on a radio show that I had a few years back, and he was explaining how confusing it was to be a teenager growing up in that Lubbock area, in that land of fundamentalist Church of Christ folks out there who would explain to them as teenagers that sex was just the vilest, most disgusting thing that there is on earth, and that they should save it for someone they love. Explains a lot about love.
That's too funny.
Well, your activism is key to creating a society that we would love, a society that is actually based on love. You're showing the truth of that great Patti Smith song. People have the power to dream, to rule, to wrestle the world from fools. That's the challenge that we face. This has been a long and historic struggle in our country. At the very start, in fact, of America's bold democratic experiment, Ben Franklin wrote that the power of America is not might, but light. Light. And the light that he meant was and is our people's commitment to those values of justice, fairness, and opportunity for all. For generations since that Franklin statement, the remarkable advances that we have made, and we need to admit that and to celebrate that we have made toward the light, have not come from the great men of history that they teach in schools, but from the mavericks and mutts, the downtrodden and the outcasts, the rebels, and yes, the radicals. Radicals. I referred to as agitators at the start of this little peroration. The powers that be try to make that a pejorative in our society. Oh, those agitators. Our workers were perfectly happy in this factory until those union agitators came. Poor people didn't mind living up against the toxic waste dump. Environmental agitators started messing with their heads. Well, of course, hockey. Agitation is what America's all about. Were it not for agitators, we'd all be wearing white powdered wigs here this afternoon singing God Hail the Queen. Agitation in the United States of America, the possibility of democracy did not come from the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Declaration of Independence, from the great men. They created the possibility of democracy, but the real thing has come from the Thomas Paines and Sons of Liberty, the Pamphleteers, Shades of Rebellion, from Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass, from the Populists and Suffragists, from Gawpers and Debs, Mother Jones and Joe Hill, John L. Lewis, Woody Guthrie, Walter Reuther, Ida Tarbell, Upton Sinclair, Rachel Carson, Harvey Milk, Karen Silkwood, Cesar Chavez, MLK Jr., and now down to us. Time for us to be the agitators again. And when they say, oh, you're just an agitator, you can say back to them, yeah, that's the center post in the washing machine that gets the dirt out. This is why your organizations and efforts to bring people together, like this Progressive Summit, are so important. As we see in Washington and on Wall Street, too few American leaders today, corporate, political, media, even religious, even want to talk about the light that Franklin suggested, much less move toward it. Of course, I think our problem is we've got too many 5-watt bulbs sitting in 100-watt sockets. But the truth is that change never comes from above down. Never comes from the powers that be. In this book, and I want to add my appreciation to Ruben Martinez and his great bookstore for bringing his store inside with us here today. I always go with the independent bookseller. Susan DeMarco, my co-author in this book, and I, we tell a story about a guy who was in Thailand. He was a tourist, and he came out of the Great Temple. And over here was a monk in full regalia. So the tourist signaled to the monk, may I snap your picture? The monk nodded and posed, and the tourist took the picture. Well, over here was a boy selling water. And he went over to buy a bottle of water to give to the monk, and he paid for it and waited for his change, but it was not forthcoming, so he thought there was a language problem. So he said to the boy, pointing at his palm, "Don't I get change?" And the boy looked up at him and looked over at the monk and then back, and in perfect English said, "Change comes from within." Indeed, it does. And that's the only place it comes from within our hearts, from within our guts, from within our heads, but mostly from within our communities, and building that community into something ever larger, something that becomes democracy in practice and becomes the majority. You know, they say the first job of the citizen is to keep your mouth open, but it helps that that mouth is attached to a brain. That is the importance of each of your organizations and what you're doing. But more importantly, it's the significance of coming together into a larger entity, because you have the information and the insight. You have the observations and the connections that can link ordinary folks up to bring the brain power to mouth power, to foot power, that then produces political power in our society. I compare outfits like y'all's to a little hardware store near my home in Austin. It's a small place called Harold's Hardware, not one of these big box things. It's about half the size of this room right here. But it's a great store, because you don't have to buy the whole box of nails. They'll sell you 2 nails. You know, that's what you need. And they'll say, "Well, what are you trying to build?" "Well, I'm going to make a lectern here." "Well, let's pencil it out here and see what you need." They'll loan you a tool. You can take a tool home, bring it back. And the slogan at Harold's Hardware is, "Together we can do it yourself." That has to be our slogan, doesn't it?
That's right.
Because we can't do it ourselves. But together, we can really make big, big things happen. And the good news that I bring to you this afternoon is that you are not alone. All across the country, the people are revolting in the very best sense of that word. I am a lucky duck. I get to travel a lot, go to a lot of different places, been just about every place that's got a zip code, I think. But so I don't have to get my sense of what America is and is not from the nightly news, or even from the New York Times or Wall Street Journal, much less Fox or something like that. Rather, I'm seeing it in action. And everywhere I go, I find that someone or some group of someones or some coalition of groups of someones are taking charge. And this is where the action is. I know a lot of us say, "Well, why is there not a national movement?" We are the national movement. Piece by piece, it's building. And it's going to come into a national explosion at the proper time. But the proper action now is right here. Exactly what you are doing. Unity efforts just like this are happening all across the country. In fact, October 1st, I'll be up the road here in Fresno, in the San Joaquin Valley. They're bringing Valley progressives together, doing the same thing up there that you're doing right here. In July, I was in Sugar Land, Texas. Now, if that rings just a slight bell to you, it would be because Sugar Land is the home of Tom DeLay. There is a progressive coalition organizing in Sugar Land, Texas. Back when Tom was under indictment and all that stuff, one of his Republican pals said, "Well, sometimes Tom's his own worst enemy." And I said, "Not while I'm alive." He's Next weekend, I'll be in Madison, Wisconsin for the Fighting Bob Fest. For those who don't know, Fighting Bob this event is named for Fighting Bob LaFollette, the former governor and U.S. Senator from Wisconsin. Very extraordinary progressive guy. Took on the corporate powers at the time, despite being a Republican. He was a Lincoln Republican. Wow. And he later figured out that he could not tear his party away from the corporate power, so he created the Progressive Party in the 19-teens and ran for president. I think in 1924 he got about 25% of the vote. So a very rich tradition of history there. We need to know our history more and tell people about our history. This isn't new, what we're engaged in now. This is a continuum, part of a long democratic struggle. Well, They've started a thing back there 10 years ago. This will be the 10th one that they've had. A guy named Ed Garvey kind of got it going. Great Irish lawyer there, great spirit. His spirit is, he'll interrupt a fight and say, is this a private fight or can anyone join it? We need that attitude. So kind of got this thing going. And what it is, Fighting Bobfest, is kind of a county fair of politics. All kinds of speeches and music, great food. They've got 24 different restaurants, all sorts of ethnic food, people coming together. They've got exactly like you have here, the tabling and the booths and getting people signed up. They have more than 100 of those gathered there. They had the great Wisconsin beer, of course. You got to lubricate the movement, I believe. And they come up with their own people's agenda. They have a 2-hour breakout session on different issues, and then they carry that to the legislature. And they pass legislation, not waiting on the lawyers and the politicians and the lobbyists to set the agenda, but the people themselves going into the legislature with it. This year they'll have Cornel West is going to be there, Tammy Baldwin, a lesbian member of the U.S. Congress, now going to run for U.S. Senate for real estate. How Bernie Sanders is going to be there. Senator Tom Harkin from across the way in Iowa. Tom Harkin. So it's going to be a great thing. And the slogan there is, let's put the party back in politics. Don't you think we need that? It shouldn't just be committee meetings. You know, we've got to have things like happy hours. We've got to have music. We've got to let it all kind of flow here. And that's where the progressive movements came from. You know, you look at the labor movement, if you study that history, and I know you just had a session on it, you go back in there, that they were a cultural movement. It was not just labor laws or strikes. It was a whole cultural movement. I was in Chicago a few years ago. We were doing a big event at a park there, and we were working out of the old Amalgamated Clothing Workers Hall there. And I began to wander around. It's a 4-story, great old building. And down on the first floor, there were these like bank tellers windows. And I thought, well, that's strange. But it turns out that this was before unemployment compensation, so they had windows to be able, the union would pay a little bit of cash to a family that was laid off or needed help. They had a library where they taught English as a second language to immigrants who were in at the time. And up on the top floor, they had one of the most beautiful ballrooms I've ever seen. Fantastic murals in it. And they had 4 dances a week in this ballroom. It was a cultural movement. The same thing with the populist movement. The old people's movement began actually out of Texas and then spread up through the Plains states and off across the upper Midwest, through the South, all the way out to California. I'm sure you don't hear any history about it here, but your Upton Sinclair race that happened here, that was in that tradition at least. And it was all based not just on politics. In fact, it was first an economic movement. The populist movement was based on breaking the bankers' control over capital, that was overcharging those farmers, and then also breaking the railroad monopoly that controlled the price that the farmers could get for the grain, because they couldn't get the grain to market. They had to depend on the railroad monopolies. So they were being squeezed by those. So they set up their own alternative economic system based on cooperatives, and it succeeded. It was a phenomenal success, but it was also a cultural movement, because rural people were ignorant at the time. They were not educated. So they set up schools. They had these Chautauqua type events. They had people organized into glee clubs and to put on plays and that sort of thing. It was all about fun, and they had the music and etc. So we got to get back to that spirit, I think, putting the party back in politics. So I would urge you, put your own Fighting Bobfest together right here. You'll have your own name for it, of course. But this is a wonderful event. It's just a one-day event. And by the way, you don't charge to come into it, but you can't get out without paying. They get 10,000 people come to this, 10,000 people, and they pass the hat, and it pays for itself every year. It's really a way to bring people together and make something happen and create a little celebration as well as some serious organizing. Well, not just in places like Wisconsin, but tell you a little story about coalition politics working in Dallas, Texas. Not a bastion of left-wing political thought. Dallas, Texas. In 2008, thanks to a fellow named Fred Barron, who's terrific. He died just a few months ago. Trial lawyer, put money up, got the right kind of people to do the organizing, and recruited and ran very good people for county offices, county judges, county clerk, sheriff, district attorney, et cetera, et cetera. They won every seat. They were all Republicans, and they switched them to Democrats in 2008 by this collective effort of focusing on issues that people cared about, running as a ticket, and going at people with a strong message. They were all re-elected last year in 2010, so this is not a fluke. We now have a Latina lesbian who is sheriff of Dallas County. Who is district attorney, that has changed the whole judicial system in Dallas. This one, and he's terrific. Well, and then ground zero of the Coke-funded class war against America's middle class. Wisconsin itself, I was there in February for that huge rally, 150,000 people that created the movement themselves. It really wasn't organized. And it wasn't just union people there. There was a tractor-cated farmer who came to join in solidarity. There were teachers, students, old people, young people. It was just a phenomenon. I haven't seen anything, snow on the ground. I haven't seen anything like it in years. And the greatest sign, the placard that had a lot of handmade signs, and the greatest one was because they were taking on, of course, this Wisconsin governor who's going after the middle class there, and also taking on the football. And the sign said, "You screw us, we reproduce." Experience I'll give you one more example of stuff going on because it's something that we'd like you to participate in. And that's going to happen on the week of October 23rd. It's a new kind of coalition effort. We're calling it We the People right now. And it's going to be a week of action against corporate money in our politics in this country. We're going to call for outing the corporation, out of our elections, out of our Constitution, out of our species, for God's sake. Corporation is a person. Where's his name? A guy, I saw a letter to the New York Times said, "What if corporation is a person? Can I marry one?" Is Google single? Well, what this effort is about is I was sitting with Katrina Vanden Heuvel. She's the wonderful editor of The Nation magazine, a wonderful person all around. And we're in New York having lunch, and I was commiserating, as I always do, why can't the progressive media ever cooperate? We don't know each other. We don't talk to each other, much less coordinate in any way. So we said, well, let's just do it. Let's find some way to make it happen. And that's how this thing came to pass. So in that week of October 23rd, or actually in the month of October, we're going to have all the progressive media, as many as we can. But we've got Nation Magazine, Progressive, Hindu Times, Mother Jones, My Hightower Lowdown, others. We're going to have the community radio stations. We're going to have the alternative weekly newspapers. We're going to have all sorts of blogs and great Tom Hartman, Laura Flanders, Amy Goodman, etc. Get the progressive media all at one time for a week long talking about corporate money in politics, and then we're going to link that communication so enough that it rises to a level above a little peep, which is what we've been having. A little peep over here, a little peep over there, but it doesn't amount to anything. Loud enough that people hear it, because we don't have to convince people that corporate money in politics is bad. Something like 90% of people already hate corporate money in politics. So 78% of Republicans want a constitutional amendment to outlaw corporate money in politics. We don't have to convince them. We're going to raise this thing, the Citizen United decision to the level, but the whole corporate money in politics to a national level, loud enough with an echo chamber that millions of people who have not heard about it now hear about it, and we're going to connect that then to Public Citizen, to Move On, to Free Speech for People, to Move to Amend, to these organization perks are going to be a part of it, the color of
Color
change, right. These groups are all these activist groups, so we're going to link them at a local level. So we want local radio stations, local communities, newspapers, and et cetera, to be talking about it, but then to connect to local contacts here so that we get people signed up to get involved in this local action, and that local action then becomes national action. So I hope you will consider participating in this with us on October 2. We'll have not only me, but Moyers, Van Jones, a good number of the name, Barbara Ehrenreich, and folks like that, Andy Leonard, that's done the video on this, other good folks who will be talking all around the country during that period. So
where is it?
It's right here. It's going to be wherever you are. It's not going to be any place. It's going to be everywhere around the country. We are going to give some focus to Columbus, Ohio, because they have a huge fight there to pass a constitutional amendment, yes it is, to repeal SB 5 that was the anti-worker, one of the most vicious anti-worker laws that has been passed this year. And they needed 300,000 signatures, and they got 1.3 million signatures.
Right.
So we can be back in touch through whatever, but we want y'all to be a part of this, because I think it'll energize a lot of folks that you're not even talking to right now who would get involved in something like this. Well, again, what you're doing here in Orange County is integral to a revitalized national progressive movement. I think this is a big time for America, a big time for you and me. Another of those when in the course of human events moments that Thomas Jefferson wrote about. And so we've got to be bigger than we ever have been. I was in Vermont a couple of years ago with Sanders doing some politicking up there, and a guy came up wearing a political button. It was the best one I've ever seen. He said, "Wearing a button is not enough." We came to the next level. It's no longer enough to be progressive. We're plenty progressive, but we got to become aggressive.
Yeah.
Because the powers that be are going radically weak. Powers that be, their plutocracy, want to put their narrow elitism, their insidious bigotry over America's democracy, middle class, and rich diversity. So this is a historic and a national struggle that we're in. It's got to come from right here, though. It's not going to happen because somebody with a national name is going to make it happen. It's going to come from the bottom up. So you are powering up a new progressive movement that can actually move. How about that? What have we moved? Not just saying we're a movement, but we don't have to say it because we are moving. That's the goal, I think. There's a great comment by late great Southern humorist Louis Grizzard, who said something that we in the South have always known to be true, and that is that there's a big difference between being naked and being naked. Being naked means you have no clothes on, but being naked, that means you have no clothes on and you are up to something. So my message to you, and I'm sure you're wondering what it is this. Just keep on keeping on, only more so. Keep reaching out. A lot of those odd bedfellows out there that are really with us, farmers. You say, well, I don't know any farmers. Well, go to the farmers market. They're farmers. They're with us. Because they know what corporate power has done to them, the squeeze that they feel. And they found a way around it. So those are wonderful allies for us, and people who are talking to people at least once a week at these farmers markets. Small business people, certainly restaurateurs and people like that. Extraordinarily progressive. A lot of doctors are now progressive because so many are coming from Asian nations, Arab nations, Central America, and et cetera. So many are women now. At least family practitioners are extraordinarily progressive. We shouldn't just assume that they're not going to be with us. We should reach out and see if we might get some working with us. Evangelical Christians. You may not know it, but there's a whole thing of evangelical environmentalism that is built within that movement. These are very, very strong, sincere, and strong environmental people. We had a chance to tap into them. They don't like calling it environmentalism, they call it creation care. But who gets to that, what they call it? same thing. We got a chance to reach out to people who would not in the past have even talked to us. Now we've got a chance to do this. You know, some say, well, it's kind of like herding cats, Hightower, just to get our own stuff together. But you know, anyone who says you can't herd cats, never tried a canopy. And our can opener is that set of values: economic fairness, social justice, equal opportunity for all people. Americans believe in that. And that's how we've got to put our issues forward. Now, you know, here's my issue paper. You know, here's my ream of statistics here. But here are the values that we're talking about. Here's the story that we can tell. And yes, it's got to be a story. I mentioned Dan Jones. He was at me once, and he's kind of scolding a group of liberals there about you paying too much time to statistics and that sort of thing, you know, all this stuff. He said, remember, Martin Luther King Jr. at the Lincoln Memorial in 1963 did not say, I have a position paper. He said, I have a dream. And he painted that dream. And that's what we have to do. Tell the story of the world that we think, or at least the America, or maybe at least of the Orange County, that we think could exist. And that with joint efforts of a lot of people will exist. So we need to formulate those stories and then tell them. One more story. I seem to have a lot of Vermont in my head today, but I was heard about a guy 4 years ago, I think it was. He was running. Well, he was running. He was Fred Tuttle was his name, and he's a farmer, a dairy farmer. And he was pissed off because a guy from Massachusetts, a multimillionaire, had moved to Vermont to buy the U.S. Senate seat in Vermont. He's going to run in the Republican primary. He said, I'll win that, and then I'll be your senator. Well, a lot of Vermonters were not charmed to have a multimillionaire from Massachusetts come over to be their senator. And so Tully, nobody would run against this guy, so Tully got pissed off. He said, well, I'll run. And he filed his papers. But he had no money at all. He had no name. He had no organization. But he did have a story to tell about these money bastards should not be controlling our politics. The people ought to be controlling. And he campaigned on a manure spreader. And that led to the best bumper sticker I've ever seen. It said, "Spread Fred." And he won. He defeated the multimillionaire. Finally, we just got to persevere. We got to keep on, keep it on. You know, sometimes it's easy to get frustrated in this work. You know, well, God, you know, we work so hard. I know a lot of people say, well, God, we got Obama in there, and it's just so frustrating. The Democrats in the Senate, they're not doing enough, and it's just horrible. Well, get a grip. You know, you don't win the first time out. You know, it takes constant effort, a constant struggle to make things happen. I think of the suffragists, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, and the triumvirate that led that movement. None of them ever lived to vote. Never cast a ballot. It was a 70-year fight to get anywhere near that possibility of suffrage. They put the idea out, but they had to have hundreds of referendums. They had 19 different fights in the Congress, in 19 different Congresses. They went state legislature, they went to political parties. They had all this organized. It took them 70 years, and finally they got the Congress to vote, to put it before the states to vote on it. And it came down to one vote in the Congress. And one fellow was in the hospital who was going to vote with suffrage. And he checked himself out so he could be there. Another one had fallen and broken his leg. He came back. Another one was with his wife in New York, who was dying. And she said, go to Washington. And she died. But they voted, they got to put it before the states. And then it came down to Tennessee. They had enough states to pass it, but it down to Tennessee. The Speaker of the House was going to vote in Tennessee for suffrage, but he switched at the last moment. And that meant it was going to lose. But then a young man, 24-year-old state legislator, was going to vote against it, and he stood up and he switched his position. And the reason was, he said, he got a letter saying, vote with the suffragists. Stand up. I haven't seen you stand up yet, and I'm wondering why you're not standing up for suffrage. Signed, your mother. Finally, just keep trusting your instincts, keep trusting your partners in this coalition effort, keep trusting the power of your values. I'll leave you with this. There's a moving company. When I moved down to Austin, Texas in '76, there's a moving company there that had an advertising slogan that I liked, so I stole it for political purposes. I think it was called something like Skeeter and Boaters Moving Company. Those kind of things. And their slogan, they had an ad in the Yellow Pages and it said, if we can get it loose, we can move it. That's what we're talking about now. Get it loose at the grassroots level. The people will move it for themselves. Thank you very much.
Do any of you have any questions? Okay, so why doesn't everyone sit down, and Mr. Hightower and pick and choose. And Daniel will come around with our local.
I wanted you to address your relations with Rick Perry. And also the Van Jones American Dream movement. If you could address that, please. I appreciate that.
Yes.
Thank you.
Well, Perry, I mean, this guy's really put the goober in gubernatorial. 10 years now. It's gotten down there. He is pretty much, well, there are two Perrys. The Republicans get two candidates in one suit with him. One, a guy who has adopted the whole far right-wing Tea Party madness. He's Michelle Bachmann with better hair, basically. He is completely, he's bought it all. Not only that, you know, we must do away with Social Security, we have to do away with Medicare, because government has no role in doing these things. We should not have a national minimum wage. We should not have direct election of U.S. senators. The state legislatures should do this. The guy is he's not too tightly wrapped, you know, really. But then on the other hand, what they get is a committed corporate plutocrat. He has been a servant to the special interests in Texas. He never met a lobbyist he would not hug if that lobbyist was carrying a campaign check. And he does favors for those, big favors for those who put the money in his pocket. That's his crony government, just right across the board. And that's who he would be as governor. And you can see it in the super PACs that are getting behind him, and the kind of folks, the kind of corporations that are his campaign.
Can you speak louder?
Can I speak louder? I don't know. See if that's something. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, you know, I don't think that Perry is going to go that far, just because, you know, as they say, the higher the monkey climbs, the more you see of its ugly side. And Van Jones, New American Dream Organization. It's a terrific new effort. We should all be behind it. It is an effort particularly focused on jobs and particularly focused on people who not only are out of work, but the middle class that knows that they are being knocked out of the middle class. So it has an enormous potential. It is not the only organization, but it is a new one. And Van Jones is terrific and smart as he can be. part of this October 23rd.
Thank you so much for speaking to us today and inspiring us. You gave us some great words about what to do when we don't succeed the first time, which is to keep trying. And I know we're all thinking about that with the White House the way it is today. A great theme we had here today was getting disparate groups together to move forward together for positive change. Do you have any advice or comment about getting people who don't necessarily share all the same ideals, working together to affect that positive change? And I'm thinking specifically about the group you mentioned, the Evangelicals for Creation Care, because I know so many people in this room agree on so many points that sometimes when we get into a fight over the areas where we don't agree, we're not as powerful. So perhaps you could give us some advice on that.
Well, my main advice is to do exactly what you're doing, and then expanding that by bringing some of these people into the fold, or at least to experience it, so that we get to know each other. If you know people, it's kind of hard to hate them. And you learn from them, and they learn from you. I'm a big believer in potluck suppers, for example, as a progressive organizing tool in a town, in a community, or in a county, I guess. And that it be a moving feast that in 1 week, the potluck is on this side of town, somebody's putting it on, and that group gets to talk about what the feature will be their major issue that they want to discuss. But the beauty of potluck is people are busy. You know, they've got kids to get fed, and they've got to get homework done, and all this. But potluck means you get fed. You bring one dish, and then you have some music. You have a little of that beer and wine. You rub up against each other and get to know each other a little bit. And you hear about that, and then that person, that side of town, can say, well, we're having this action, can some of you join us? What they do. And then the next week, it's on another side of town, and they've got the agenda. And then you join their action. And once you begin to join each other's action, we can't sit around and wait on people to come to us. We have got to go to them. And like on environmentalism, I hear a lot of them. Well, we can't get young people to come to our meeting. Go to their meeting. Same thing with these evangelicals or other groups. Go seek them out. The responsibility to organize is not theirs, it's ours.
What a joy to have you here. The day that the mail brings the Hightower lowdown makes my whole week. I want to follow up on Ron's question about Rick Perry. We're one of the few people who's run against him. And he was out here recently, and the progressive group protested against him. Now, it seemed to me that this would be totally counterproductive because that would just solidify him with his right-wing base. So I'd like your advice on how progressives should deal with Rick Perry. Shouldn't we strongly endorse him and support him? Or is he and his supporters, are they bright enough to figure out that we would just be going for the opposite?
Well, his support base is so small and so narrow that, there's no changing those minds, so we don't have to worry about that, really. Rather, we've got to talk to some of the sane people in our society. And we have to expose Perry for who he is, because he's going to do that strut around cowboy stuff and look good. It's what we have to do is tell the truth about who he is, and that's what I've been doing on these TV shows and in the radio columns and etc., radio commentaries and other writing I've been doing, but also feeding other people, getting other people to focus. As the media comes to Texas to look, we went through this with George W. The media came down with George W. And they said, we understand George W. takes drugs. We said, well, maybe, I don't know, but do you know that the drug he's really on is corporate money? And we can show you that. No, we want to see the drugs. And so they completely missed the big story of who George W. was going to be. And the same thing is true of Perry. But the media is coming down with a bit of a different attitude, and we're really working on it down there. Don't just go looking for scandal and that sort of thing. Look at who this guy is and what he's done, what his policies are, and what he's actually put into action. For example, we've had these rather horrible wildfires in Central Texas, right around Austin, where I live, this last week. And Perry was off campaigning in South Carolina when this happened. But he did come scooting back the next day to pose as governor, doing photo ops and that sort of thing. And then he assailed Barack Obama, saying, well, Barack Obama's not been cooperating. The federal government doesn't cooperate with the states. So we found that Perry had, this spring, cut the budget of volunteer fire departments by 75%. And so, maybe that's, and volunteer fire departments are the first responders to 9 out of 10 wildfires. So this was relatively significant and relevant. So that's the kind of thing that we have to be doing, I think. But I'm not yet convinced that their primary is done, that there's not somebody else going to. As Ron Paul says, Perry is this week's Donald Trump. We'll see. But he's got a lot of uglies on him, and a lot of right-wing opposition to him too, by the way. So he's a long way from there.
Hi, with Texas being the execution capital of the entire planet, how strong is this public sentiment in Texas for abolishing the death penalty?
Well, the sentiment on the death penalty is growing, and abolishing that is growing. And in fact, this new DA in Dallas that I mentioned has been very active he's thrown a bunch of cases out of Dallas County, and people who are already in prison because of faulty evidence and new DNA evidence and that sort of thing. So we've got a lot of those taking place right now. Perry has one in particular, a guy named Wallingham, who was executed even though there was substantial evidence, and some very, very conservative prosecutors said this guy should not be executed, that there's substantial evidence that the evidence was tampered with, or exonerating evidence was not used, etc. So that's right on Perry's head. Perry's executed 234 people. So there is, Texans are strong believers in the death penalty, but they don't think you ought to kill them if they're not guilty. So it's growing. It used to be an impossible issue even to discuss, but now it's very loud. And the jailhouse group that does the DNA, what's the name? The
Forensics.
group of lawyers that does.
Oh.
Yeah, Innocent Project. Yeah, they're very active.
I wanted to talk a little bit about the Democratic side in 2012. Like a lot of progressives here, I have two feelings about the president. On the one hand, I know, like you said, that I'm going to end up supporting him a year from now and campaigning for him and all that. On the other hand, sometimes that really chaps my butt, as I think you say less prettily in Texas. What I want to know is, would people like, what is your feeling about this? This has been something which was on Salon recently and things like that, about the idea of favorite son and favorite daughter candidates not intending to deny the president the nomination, running in their own state, such as, for example, you could be on the ballot in Texas, and give progressives the chance to say to the president through that vote, we know we're going to nominate you, we're okay with nominating you, but damn it, we'd like you to be more like Jim Hightower. And to say that with you running in Texas, perhaps, other people running in the other October 23rd people you're running in their own states where their favorite sons and daughters, just so progressives have a chance to get that out of our system before we go and campaign for the president a year from now.
That's good thinking. I don't know that particular one would quite get there, but that kind of thinking to send a very, very clear message to Obama and his team that we count. And he's been able to govern the last 3 years without even consulting progressives. And now I see that he has brought in an economic advisor who's, his metal labor union leader. So that's the kind of thing that we do need to be thinking of, ways to send that message that is a protest vote, yet is still, of course, we're not going to vote for, Rick Perry or Mitt Romney or Rick Santorum or whoever they come up with. But you need to, you're not paying attention to, they call it the base, I don't like that term. You're not paying attention to the middle class, the rationale for the Democratic Party to exist. We need to have, more members of Congress standing up too.
Yeah.
We have some very progressive, good members of Congress. The Progressive Caucus in the House is extraordinary. Robert Hall is chair of it out of Tucson. Keith Ellison, who's a Muslim member of Congress out of Minneapolis, and Donna Edwards, who's carrying the legislation to repeal Citizens United. We just have so many really good ones, and we need to give them strength, and need to find a way to have a conversation with them to do something like this, some expression. And you can always count on Maxine Waters to.
Yeah.
I'm going to do 2 more questions. I have one here, and then is there another one? And then one Bruce, and then that's it.
Jim, I'd like your reaction to a kind of a far-out suggestion. If we want people to support us, we got to have an idea that really gets their attention because they're hurting badly and they need our support. How would you react to a plan to bring the jobs back to America by banning all imports of manufactured products?
I think that has implications that we don't want. But what I would do is to say that there would be no tax advantages to corporations that go take the job out of the country. I would also say that we need the WPA and the CCC back. I would say that we should go to people with a bolder program on health care that is Medicare for all. And just generally, the reconstitution of the middle class has to be the message, the agenda of the Democratic Party. If we say it, and if our candidates begin to say that, people will come out of the woodwork. That's been our problem in our elections. It's not that America's turned right-wing or turned conservative. Texas hasn't. Rick Perry was elected last year, re-elected last year, as governor of Texas. And he makes a big point of it. Now, I got 58% of the vote. They love me down in Texas. Well, what he doesn't tell you is we had the lowest voter turnout in America. We had 33% of people vote. So he's the choice of about 18%.
Yeah.
But the Democrat couldn't get 19% because we had a good candidate actually, but these consultants got around and said, no, you got to appeal to the independent swing voter. So you can't say things like Medicare for all, or you can't talk about jobs, job creation by government, and etc. So he did. And so if we're not standing up for those people, when are they going to stand up for us? So our problem is not Perry or the Republicans' journey. Our problem is us. We've got to fix us. And if we get that old message back, and it is an old message, but it's old because it's true, and that is that the middle class is what matters, and we're going to be lifting people up, not knocking them down, including, of course, poor people, raising that forward as well. And we'll win every election in this country if we just do that. But that's our challenge. We've got to make it happen.
One more.
Thanks so much for coming. I know you used to be the comedy commissioner in Texas, or the agricultural commissioner, excuse me. Would you like to comment on this administration's behavior in regards to agriculture, or like comment on the USDA and FDA, things like that? Thank you.
Well, the Obamacans have been with agriculture and food policy generally about like they have been with other policies. They take a step forward and then a half step back. But that's a half step better than we have had, so we can't be just dismal about it. But there's much more that can be done. And they've done symbolic things that are important. I think having an organic garden on the White House lawn is a positive. You know, it does send a message. It drove the chemical lobby crazy. A pretty short ride, actually, for them, but you know, I do a lot of work with organic farmers all across the country, and they appreciate it. That symbolism means something to them because it verifies their own efforts of what they're trying to say and the story that they're trying to tell. But yeah, we have to do much more. But at least we're in the right direction in terms of changing our agricultural policy, for example. The farm program itself, by the way, Rick Perry, who hates big government, has taken at least $88,000 in farm payments. That instead of basing farm subsidies on the volume of production, which means you're going to strain the land as much as you possibly can, and the biggest people are going to take the most money, like Charles Schwab, for example, is one of our subsidizees. Instead of that, let's subsidize the people who give something back to our environment, to our country, etc. And that would be the farmers who are switching to organic, sustainable, local marketing. That sort of thing. Put our money in that, in diversification, and then that's something that the American people would overwhelmingly support, and we gain just in numerous ways by making that sort of stand. So, what Obama's not going to do that. But he's taking steps in that direction, and that's what we have to push. And we have to be pushing Tom Harkin, he's not chair of the Health Committee, but he was chair of the Ag Committee. But push our members of Congress to get us an agricultural food policy that works for everyone. And that's what farmers want. I was just at Farm Aid with IMC, the thing with Willie Nelson and Mellencamp and Neil Young and Old Dave Matthews, and that's what farmers want. They want a food policy, not just a farm policy. So again, that outreach to put that kind of a coalition together, we will win that fight. I guarantee you, because it is what people want. It's what consumers want. It's what farmers want. It's what the food artisans want. It's what the market wants. It's all there for us, and we're making great strides. Not so much because of what's happening in Washington. In fact, we're making little strides there, but because of what ordinary people have done. This has been one of the great populist success stories of the progressive movement, is the change in food in our country. In just 20 years, really, we've gone from, it's created by what I call, in fact, we write about it in this book, called the Upchuck Rebellion, to good food. With, you know, those farmers markets are just fabulous. The artisans, the beers, and the terroir wines, you know, and the cheeses, and all that sort of thing. I mean, it's just a revolution has taken place, and it was not created by anyone in power. It was created by ordinary folks, farmers, and consumers, and artisans, good people, environmentalists, and a few local officials getting together and making a difference. So it just shows it can happen. We've got to parse out these stories and begin to explain them to people. People say, well, you can't make any change. The food economy has just changed 180 degrees in 20 years' time. It's just a remarkable result. And it's happening in a lot of areas in our society, but we have to be able to tell those stories, because that shows people that it gives them the courage to then step forward and do what's got to be done. Again, thank you so much. Let's have a happy hour.
I'll try to make this as quick as possible. If you would like to hear more from Jim Hightower, we put these Stay in the Loop pamphlets on each table, and so if you want to fill it out and bring it to the OCEC booth over here and turn it in, you'll get his weekly email newsletter. My name is Yuki Harada, and I am actually one of the volunteers on the steering committee for the Orange County Progressive Summit. As you all know, the intent of the summit is to bring together progressively minded individuals and organizations so that we can work together and build our community right here in Orange County. And after seeing this event come together for the second year in a row, I really believe we succeeded in taking that step towards strengthening our movement. And I'd like to take a moment to thank both Steve Chavez and Jim Hightower again, all the workshop presenters, our dedicated volunteers, and the organizations represented here today. Let's give them one more round of applause. Of course, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this year's summit. I hope that all the workshops and the speakers really resonated with you, and you leave today's event with resolve to create change and share what you've learned at the summit with others. Of course, as Jim mentioned, activism is about creating a society that we want to see and that we want to love. So I really